Welcome to A Photographer's Life, the channel that takes you behind the curtain into the world of professional architectural photography. Join us now for an episode with some of America's premier architectural photographers. Today's broadcast comes from a recent Zoom meeting of the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This discussion is led by AIAP Director Alan Blakely. We hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. Now, on with the show.
Norm, I'm going to kick off with your suggestion about the what's in your case question.
I don't know how many of you guys get this, but I swear it. Sometimes I get 4 or 5 calls a month, but usually 2 or 3 from people all over the country. I had a guy in Oregon that he's a good photographer. He called me and said, "Boy, I love your pictures. You know, you can see through the windows. Your lights are never blown out. Blah blah." He asked me what I used, and I told him, and he hung up on me. And I wasn't lying. And then he got a hold of me later on. He goes, "You don't have to lie to me." He goes, "Just," and I said, "I'm not." But I get that all the time. People, what's in your camera bag? Now, we're in digital, so I don't use a view camera anymore. I haven't got the Horseman out, and I don't even know where it's at. But but here in my camera bag, I get it all the time. What's in your camera bag? This is my camera bag. It's a million years old Tamrac bag, and I don't have the latest, greatest, super. This is what I use every single job I go to, and I'm not lying. Okay. I have it here.
We're not going to hang up on you.
Don't hang up on me.
Yeah, we're done.
This is a Sony 700. It's 15 years old. It's a 12 megapixel camera. The lens is, look at it. It's battered, beat. It's super sharp. It's an 11 millimeter. That's what I use 50% of the time. And oh yeah, sure you do. And I really do. I've won every contest. That camera's amazing. This is my favorite camera in the whole world. I've got other Sonys and Canons and blah blah blah, but this is what I use. This is a Sony 850. It's the exact same as a 900. It has a slower buffer rate if you're doing rapid shooting for frames per second. It's 26 megapixels. This is my primary camera. I got them all over the place. I use them in the studio. I use them, but this is what I take on a job. This is a Minolta 20 millimeter. I think it's a 1.8 20 millimeter lens. It's my favorite lens. It's almost rectilinear. It's like the other one. I do image correction with the software that comes with it. I no longer use a perspective control lens. When I was shooting Canon, I was using their 24 millimeter perspective control. And it takes time to do that. I don't like the 24 millimeter format. I mean, I do like it, but the 20 and the 11 here give me, I'm able to capture an entire scene. And these work for me. And I do the perspective control electronically with the software that comes with the lenses. It's excellent. But that's what I use. And, I have other lenses in here, 50s and 20s and 28s and whatever else. But those are my 2 primary cameras when I do an architectural job. And I'm really not lying. It's honestly what I use. And I bought these 2 Sonys in 2013 or 2012. I don't know, however old they are. You have to look them up. But they've been fantastic cameras, and they don't break. Other than sending everything out for a CLA, which I do all the time, every year. I've never had a failure with those cameras, and that's what I use. So I get that from people, and I remember I just shot a job for a client. He had hired a Chicago photographer. The guy, he's a nice guy. He's a kid. He's came with the latest Canon, 60 megapixel, mirrorless, whatever. The images were horrible. And I walk in with this, and I reshot it. I think I used the 850 when I reshot the job. But the quality photographer comes from the photographer. photography comes from the photographer, knowing how to control a camera, knowing how to process an image. I don't give anybody anything off the camera. I process everything. And I'm looking at everybody's site here. I've been to all your sites. You guys do beautiful work. But that's, you know, that's what I use. That's what I like. So I'm curious, what do you guys use and what do you like? Come on, let's hear it. What's up?
I
Come
use
on, Alan, what do you use? Oh, come on, don't be.
Karen, okay. I'm happy to jump in. I'm using an 8-year-old Canon 5D SR. That's my primary camera.
There you go. That's a good camera.
And I do use the tilt shift lenses. I've got the 17 Canon, which I use maybe once a month. And the 24 I use very frequently. I use a Nikon 35 millimeter PC lens a lot, which has a Canon adapter on it. And then I use the 45 millimeter PC. And that's pretty much my lens selection. But I've used that camera now. I've had it 8 years, and I'm still very happy with it. Like you said, Norman, it goes in regularly to be cleaned and calibrated. I take care of it, that and the lenses. But people are always surprised that I'm not using medium format. And I've demoed it, and phase one has offered me cameras to take for 6 months, and it's just too much work for me. I don't like it. I might as well get the CNR out again because it's just more work than I want to do. Yeah. So that's where I am with the Canons.
I'm sorry. No, I almost bought an HD40 a few years ago, and I agree with you. I used it for a little bit, and I thought, wow, the images are fantastic. It's amazing. Yeah. But it was just too much work. Yeah.
I have to tether everything.
Who's next? I want to hear it. Come on.
Okay, before when you mentioned about the face. So now I agree that it is the photographer. Definitely, if you don't know what you're doing, I don't care what camera you have, you're not going to capture it. It's not going to be there. But for me, I do use the Canon, the full frame, but my main camera for architecture is the phase one. I find I don't have to shoot as much. I find when I use capture, like before I'd have to take, a few exposures to bring it all together. With the phase and the capture one, like it just brings back everything. I usually only take 1, maybe 2 images, and it's there. I don't my workload has cut down, I would say more than 60% shooting with a phase than shooting with any other camera and having to adjust it. But yeah, it depends, it depends. But that camera I strictly use just for my architecture. I will bring in though my Canon when I have when it's darker. I have my tilt shift. I definitely need that because my tilt shift with my Canon is the one that has, for light. It's the best one for light. And then I definitely use that one. Yeah. So that's what's in my bag.
I use a Canon 5D Mark IV, and I have a backup 5D Mark III. And I'll go a little further. I shoot tethered to an iPad using a Cam Ranger. And I just bought that Swiss Arca Cube for the top of the tripod. I used to have a Manfrotto, and it's really a very beautiful machine there. It's very precise, and helping me because my squaring is my nemesis. And I also invested in some Pro Photo B1s, and it's changed my life because they're battery powered, they are forceful, they're beautiful light, they come in a backpack, and I don't have to lug all this gear all the time. So if you're, sometimes my body, I come back and I'm just wrecked from shooting for 8 to 10 hours on my feet. So the pro photos really help with all that.
Karen, you spent a little bit of money between the Arca Swiss and the Pro Photo.
I did, you know, I really did. And I debated
Nate
them
is
both
happy
for
with
a
you.
long time, but I'm not sorry.
You guys are working too hard. That's beautiful. I like it. Karen, your work is beautiful. Very nice.
Thank you.
All right, come on. Let me hear from somebody else. Who's next?
I use the Canon 5D Mark IV and 24 tilt shift. Started back in the day with the the sign-on, of course, in Hasselblad,
Mhm.
but it works for me. And we have the Fuji GFX that we use a little bit. But it is about getting a lot done, being efficient with your system and everybody. And I go wireless with the Cam Ranger to the iPad, the 12-inch iPad. Before we had the Tether tool product, Air Direct, but that started deteriorating literally. And so they even recommended me go back to the Cam Ranger, the new Cam Ranger, because I just want my client to be able to look at the shot, not have to squat down. I don't like a lot of wires everywhere, and most of my strobes are wireless. But anyway, I think we all get in a rhythm. It's amazing. The more years we shoot, the more we show up, and we have this muscle memory of
Mhm.
we light it how we want to see it, and it just kind of takes over. I mean, my first couple of shoots back in '81, after going to Brooks, I still have, question, okay, how am I going to light this thing? But of course, with experience, my point is your brain really fills in the blanks.
Yeah.
So you have to have a good system and whatever you're comfortable with. But I would like to know the initials of the photographer in Oregon that hung up on you, but that's okay. I'm just teasing you.
That's funny.
The initial, I guess I could give it to you.
Yeah, on the backside you could do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Yeah. As Justin, my buddy, knows, we live in a crazy state and a crazy city. Yeah, nothing surprises me.
All right, who's next? Come on, you're not getting out of here without telling us what you use. Come on.
I use the Canon 6D, the original from 2014, and 20 megapixel, and that's worked for me. I have the Canon 16 to 35 f4 lens.
Mhm.
I have a backup 60 Mark II that I don't know, I've used very rarely. And my next camera will probably be one that has an articulating screen on it, just for convenience. But I feel like I'm going to continue using this camera probably until I have some issues with it that I feel like it's inadequate or it's failing or something. I've thought about replacing it, but Canon's transitioning now to mirrorless. I don't see a 60 Mark III successor coming out. So, and if they had made one, I probably would have gone that route, but it's worked well enough for me to continue using it. And I have, some other lenses, and I use some speed lights as well as like a Cheetah 360 and a couple other like a higher powered Godox flash that I use as well. So those are my main pieces of equipment.
Interesting.
All right, Barry, let's do it.
Hey, Barry. You're up.
Hey there, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Barry, let's hear it.
Sorry,
Don't pull out your Nikon F3 either. I don't want to.
no, it's a Leica M1. It's the old ways. So I assume I obviously am late, so I assume we're talking about what we do on site. So I've got a 5D SR and with a Mark III as a backup. I shoot almost everything with 16 to 35. And I don't know whether it's because I was a carpenter for so many years, but I can see right angles in 90 degrees pretty well. So I assume even when I use a tilt shift and am very careful in a bubble and all the rest of it, I'm going to have to correct. So I don't worry about it. I use that, and then a Cam Ranger that goes to an iPad, which is just great, easy, it's flawless. And it's fast. And when I have to light, I've got Einsteins Paul C. Einstein, so they're what 600 watts. And I bought these what they call China balls in the movie business. They're just big round soft boxes, basically. They're not quite. It's not quite a ball. There's a little bit on the bottom. Anyway, I'll run those up to the ceiling and just blast away. I never did very much assisting, but there was one photographer who's passed since then. I think her name was Karen Kuehl or Karen Kuhn, who was a German, and I assisted her after I turned pro, and she would just bring rent pro photos. She came out from New York to LA, and she just stuck them in the corner of the room. It was a white ceiling, and just blasted away. And it created this beautiful, nice, soft light. It didn't overwhelm the existing light if there was any that was on. And she was really fast and efficient, and her photos were beautiful. So I sort of took from that. And so that is my basic rig. I've got a same tripod I've had for 20 years almost, which is a Manfrotto something B. And I don't have a special head on it, but as I say, I seem to do pretty well with seeing what's level and straight. And with the 16 to 35, I sometimes, if I'm worried, I shoot a little bit wider than I really need. But I also have a 70 to 200, and you know, I've got a normal range of just a few lenses that I bring, and I do have a 24 and a 90 tilt shift, but I don't use them very often. I've used them for food photography, which I've done just a tiny bit of, but that's about it. You know, I try to, at the end of the day, I take the cards out and I put them in my pocket, as one was taught by journalists anyway. And but I've never had a problem with equipment getting ripped off. I'm sure the day I leave the cards in the camera will be the day everything gets stolen. Anyway, does that answer whatever the question was?
It does. What's in your bag? Let's see who's left here. We got Martin and Jared and Jordan.
Yeah.
Martin, what's in your bag?
I'm shooting Canon stuff. I have an R and an R5, and I'm using a mix of EF. Yeah, of course.
It isn't so.
Why? Why not?
I hate mirrorless. Oh, I'm old. That's why.
You know, see the thing, like I don't really like mirrorless either, but with the interiors and architecture stuff that I'm shooting like 99% of the time, you don't have to look through the viewfinder, so pretty much doesn't matter. I'm shooting tethered all the time to a laptop, and then we have a HDMI transmitter that transmits the live images to an iPad. So we have stylists and designers looking at the iPad, styling the scene while they're in it. And then I'm capturing directly to the laptop. So that way I can be doing edits on site and also making selects and picks. So we make sure that even before we leave site, we have like an overview of everything that was shot for the day, so that, you know, make sure that the whole set of images can tell the story of the project. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So because it's primarily interiors, I'm not shifting a lot. Like I have a 17 and a 24 TS, but I don't really need to use them very much for interiors. I end up using those more on exterior shots.
All right.
Interesting.
All right. We have Jared and Jordan left. Who's going?
Hey, while we're waiting, I just wanted to just show you something that Barry made me think of this. See, I don't use an expensive strobe. I use a Dynalite Baja, which you can't even buy anymore. And then he mentioned about the China gloves, but if you go to IKEA and you buy their solar porch lights, this is what the top of it looks like. And so you take that off and you throw the rest away. And it fits a 7-inch. It fits a 7-inch dome. I mean, a 7-inch reflector. And so I'm using these just like Barry's using his. And you know, this is like $10. but it's just this soft, beautiful light that you get. And you know, you can aim it at the ceiling or you can aim it directly. I've even used it for headshots, but you know, I used to have Broncolor stuff, and then Pro Photo was a sponsor of my workshops, and so I've kind of cheaped out, and I'm using you know, these Baja these Dynalights, and I also use a quantum flash, which is a speed light. That's as extensive as my lighting gets anymore. So anyway, just while we were waiting there.
I gotta also say that you mentioned headshots.
Yeah.
I was hired by a friend of mine to be a second shooter on a weird kind of commercial / event photography thing for a real estate firm for some of their advertising. And this was a long time ago, and I had a normal, you know, flash that just attached to the camera with the little square diffuser. And he had, I forget the name of it, but the round one, it's a guy's name. It'll come to me or somebody else. And he showed me side-by-side shots where we were standing next to each other, shooting this group of people. And mine had this harsh, nasty light. His looked like it had been lit by a proper strobe with a diffuser on it. Something like what you've got. And so I've never forgotten that. And I went out and bought a bunch of those things. And it's amazing what a bit of diffusion, what seems like a small bit of diffusion that's round, can really make a big difference. Yeah. And I've also got speed lights. I forgot to mention that. I bring them on occasion, but don't use them that much.
I've got a whole bunch of strobes with power packs and cords if anybody's interested. So.
Yeah, I have a bunch too, but I use them in the studio.
No.
Alan, I have that same Baja, but we're
do
trying to
you?
find out how we can buy more of those, but we can't. So
there was I'll tell you what, there's a place that bought the Dynalite inventory, and they're in, I think they're in Jersey as well. But I have bought a few parts from them, and they may have some. I don't know. I'll see if I can find their number or their name. I'll send it to you, because I actually did buy some parts because I had a couple parts go out on these Bajas. I've also got some Allen Chromes that are basically the same kind of setup, that they're a little more powerful. I think they're 800 watt seconds, but I use them the same way, battery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got some Calumets that are very similar to your Baja Light. They're probably 20
Yeah, the Calumets are wonderful, and you can still find those occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget who made them. Didn't actually make them. They private labeled them. It was I can't think of it.
How long are we going to go on this? How long are we scheduled for this?
I'd like to end at 11 or at the bottom of the hour here, so about 15.
Great. Okay, I could hang on.
Okay. So is that it? No one else is going to fess?
Jordan may have walked away. I'm not sure.
I did want to add that I always use a 24 millimeter tilt shift, but I have a 1.5 extender that I can put on it, which is a cheap way of getting a 36 millimeter tilt shift.
I really like that focal length, and that's why I mentioned that I use that Nikkor 35 millimeter PC, and that's an ancient lens. That's from the 70s. And it has a sweet spot of sharpness that it's about f11 and 11 and a half. You don't want to shoot it anywhere other than that.
Yeah, but, that's very forgiving, that lens is.
Yeah, it's such a nice length.
My lenses are all old. I mean, I like the character of old lenses. I know with a lot of Canon lenses, they're almost, I mean, they're really sharp, but they're almost too analytical. And especially if you're doing a portrait of somebody, it's like, you know, I don't need to see every crevice in someone's face or their hair. You know, I don't need to see that. So I like a lens that's a little more forgiving and a little bit softer. And if I need to sharpen it on, you know, in post, I can do that. But that's why I like the old Minolta lenses. And I've got an adapter to use some old, like Rockcore lenses that are just, I do portraits with those, and they look phenomenal. It looks like a transparency.
So this is something that cinematographers talk about a lot. I'm not a cinematographer. I'm a lurker around cinematography, and increasingly even the lens makers are softening up their lenses because the problem, if it's really a problem, is that for with digital sensors, they're so good that it's not good for faces. And it's also not good for a few other things, but particularly for faces, which is what most cinematographers are most concerned about. And so they're either what they call detuning a new lens, or they're putting in filters, or they are using the newer lenses which are come out, which have a better look, or they're. It's very common to they particularly like old Nikon primes and some of the Olympus primes, the older ones from the 60s, 70s. They'll take them and they'll have them rehoused so that they'll have a PL mount or something like that that can be used on a proper digital camera. And they're shooting real features with this, and it's that look. And then some of the lens makers like Cook, they have a thing called a Cook look, and I've been around it long enough now. You can sort of see it. You can really feel there's a real difference.
That's really important. I shot a video, and Ronnie shot it for me, one of our camera guys here, and he used one of the new Zeiss lenses on a Sony 7R4. That's the sharpest lens I've ever. It's laughably sharper than anything I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
it's too sharp, and I actually, I actually ended up reshooting to soften it up because the lens is it's silly sharp. It might be great for product photography, but for portraits or architectural, it's crazy. It's just too much. And I find that the Canon lenses, generally speaking, are sharper than Nikon lenses, or sharper than Sony lenses, and that's why I don't. And maybe it's the sensor too. Maybe the sensors are better. I'm not a big fan of Canon for architectural, for me personally, for that reason. I like the idea of using the Nikon on the Canon. I can see that being a beautiful combination.
Yeah, one thing I notice about Canon lenses is that, especially the tilt shifts, is that they are so contrasty. They remind me of Hasselblad primes because of the contrast. And I always used to like the look of a Minolta. I mean, this is back in film, but I used to like the look of the Minolta primes because they weren't quite as contrasty as the Hasselblads. And I find that same thing. I'm always having to dial back the contrast on those Canon lenses, where if it was just a little bit softer, it'd be a whole lot easier to handle. When I shoot headshots, I use a 40-year-old Canon zoom lens. And it looks wonderful. I mean, it's a beautiful lens. I don't have to do much at all to it.
What lens?
It's a 7200 zoom, and it rattles.
It's true. And I like the I like the old Minolta primes. Minolta made their own glass, and a lot of companies bought lenses and put labels on. Minolta made their own glass, and their lenses, their primes they're 55 1.2. That's a killer lens. That 50 1.2, they're just beautiful. That 80, they got an 85 a 1.4. Those are beautiful lenses to use. So when I shoot portraits, that's generally what's on my camera is a manual.
This is Jared. I am a longtime listener and a first-time caller. Really, I just am a fanboy of.
So what do you use, Jared?
What's in your camera bag, Jared?
An iPhone 12. No, I'm kidding. But I do shoot with an Nikon, but like I said, I don't do anything the magnitude that you guys do by any stretch of the imagination. But what I've been hearing though that I really, really like is that, it's not about the equipment. It's easy to jump on YouTube and catch the buzz of the latest and greatest. Canon just introduced this, Nikon just introduced this, Sony just did this, and it's just like this buzz, this crazy buzz. But hearing, you know, from you guys, it's clear that it's not about the equipment, and I've always known that. It's about, you know, honing your craft and knowing it. And then the other thing that I've picked up on that I thought was interesting is a lot of you are tethering, and I don't want to, you know, open up another conversation, you know, because we are trying to close, but I am curious the purposes around tethering as far as what are you trying to achieve there? Is it nicer to get a little bit more real estate on a screen to make sure that things are where you want it? Are you showing it to another client at the same time? You know, what's the purposes of tethering? Cam Ranger just seems to be like the go-to for those things, but just curious. And again, I don't want to open up another hour-long conversation, but I am interested.
I don't tether often. When I do, it's to a laptop, and it's just specifically so that a client can easily see the scene that we're shooting. That's my only purpose for tethering.
I do it for composition and for checking focus.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
do that too. Composition, focus, making sure my perspective is straight, and also, you know, tweaking, like being able to move objects,
Yeah.
add negative space or take away things that are too, you know, in the scene, or straightening chairs, which to the eye always look correct, but the camera sees everything so differently.
I think most of us are using Cam Ranger, and I mean, at least for me, the nice thing is to be able to walk through the shot, make adjustments, or have an assistant walk through the shot and make adjustments in real time. So, I mean, that's huge.
That's what Jared was saying. You could, you know, with I used the Cam Ranger now, but with the 12-inch iPad, and the whole tethering idea of tripping over it. But the other gentleman that was on before was talking about he has the laptop and the iPad, and he does his corrections, he does his profiling and so on, and that's great. It just takes a little bit more time, but we always have this workflow. But I am curious if people are going to start going more with wireless to an iPad, where you can actually hold it like you normally would with a magazine or a book, rather than getting down eye level with the laptop.
Oh, no, I put it on it's on a tripod stand. I just sort of strap it to a platform that's actually was designed for, no, it's a holder for iPads. You just stick it on a tripod, and it also the other thing too is that you can shoot from it. So bathrooms, as we all know, are a huge pain in the butt. So you can get the camera in there in a place where you can't be behind it, and you can still shoot. So, or around a corner where there's a mirror or something like that. So there's all kinds of ways that it's useful for that. You can, I do almost everything I do is bracketed, and so you can change the bracketing right on the iPad too. It's really fast. And I think that I'm still using the old Cam Ranger, the original one, but the newer one apparently is much better in lots of ways, including that I think it can send images to several different iPads or computers at once.
So Barry, real quick, I had the original Cam Ranger, got rid of that, went to the Air Direct, and like I said before, it started deteriorating. But the new Cam Ranger is so much faster.
Yeah, that's what I hear.
It's worth it, whatever it is.
And you can send big, like, raw images too, right? If you've
I
got
haven't tried that, but I highly recommend that. It's got 2 little antennas on it now, and batteries are kind of a hassle because it's only their battery, and you got to flip back and forth. And then with Air Direct, it was a Canon battery that you put on top. So that's the only thing that's a little bit of a nuisance.
For me, I find tethering takes time. And I just set my camera. I first I walk around and I take the images with an iPhone. And I go, okay, I want that scene, that scene, that scene, that scene. I go back to my images and I see what needs to be changed. I move around the sets, make it what I want, and then I shoot. It just, for me, tethering, it just wasted time, because when I go through the buildings, I usually have to go through them real quick. I don't have the time to set up all these sets. So I find when I'm walking with a client, that's when I'll walk with the client. What do you want? I'll take my images, then I'll go back. They go their way, I go my way, and then I capture their images real quick.
Well, Well, the clients are all going to disappear anyway because they all seem to be there with you the whole time. And in about an hour, they're
They're not
texting.
where the way I do it is I just, with my iPhone, they say, well, I want that scene. I go, is this good? Is this good? And then I'll go back and then I'll capture all the images and they can just go do their own thing.
Yeah. You got buy-in now too.
What you said cracks me up, Barry. I had a client a few years ago, a designer, and she's like, oh, she's calling everybody. Oh, I'm on a photo shoot. I'm on a photo shoot. And I come in with a camera and a tripod, and I set my stuff up. We talk about it, and I start working. And about 15 minutes into her coffee, she looks at me and goes, "Is this all you do?"
That's good.
I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Do you mind if I leave?" I'm like, "No, take off." And I'm still working with her today, but she was, she was expecting some huge, enormous, like I'm bringing a staffer. Once in a while I'll bring an assistant. Mary Beth will come with me, or I'll bring somebody with me if it's huge, and she'll stage ahead of time. But yeah, this is all you do.
That's all we do. Thanks for everybody joining this call. This has been an interesting discussion in the both parts. As we were wrapping up here, I was reminded I went on a Yosemite workshop with Ansel Adams many years ago, and he was setting up a shot, and he took out an old brass barreled red dot Dagor lens and put on, and he had a student come up to him and said, "That's not a very sharp lens, is it?" And there were some expletives after that, and he impressed upon the student that it really wasn't about the lens. He knew what he was doing, and I think that our discussion here has borne out the fact that it's not about the equipment, and as long as it's a photographer with talent that's behind the equipment, that's really what matters the most. And I hope that those who watch this later will get that message. And my apologies to the manufacturers who may watch this as well. But
It was Gene Smith that said F8 and be there.
yeah,
Yes, that's right. F8 and be there.
exactly.
That's the key.
Thanks to everybody. We'll
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
we'll have another one of these. And in the meantime, take care and be successful.
This has been another episode of A Photographer's Life. If you've enjoyed this program, please let us know by liking this episode and subscribing to this channel. A Photographer's Life is brought to you by the Association of Independent Architectural Photographers. This episode is copyrighted, and may not be used in full or in part, without the written permission of the AIAP. Please join us again soon for another inside look at the world of professional architectural photography.